Don't let me die here. Please, don't let me die where he can find me. Her fingers clawed into the mud, dragging herself forward inch by inch. Her dress was torn to rags, her face so swollen only one eye could open. Caleb Thornton pulled his horse to a dead stop. His 7-year-old daughter tightened her arms around his waist. "Papa," she whispered, "that lady's broken." Subscribe to our channel, hit the bell, drop a like, and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. We want to see how far this story travels. Now stay with us to the very end. This one's going to stay with you. Caleb was off the horse before he finished thinking. He swung Maggie down, set her boots in the dry grass. "Stay here," he said. "Don't move." "Papa." "Maggie?" She pressed her lips together and nodded. Caleb moved toward the creek bed. The woman had stopped crawling. One arm stretched forward, fingers still dug into the dirt like she'd been reaching for something that wasn't there. He dropped to one knee, rolled her over slow, careful. His jaw locked. Her face was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Swollen shut on one side, split down the lip, bruises so deep they'd gone black. He'd seen horses kicked in the head that looked better than this. "Ma'am?" He kept his voice low. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her one good eye found him, and Caleb felt it in his chest, the way she looked at him. Not confused, not grateful, terrified. Like she'd been waiting for another man to come and finish what someone started. She threw herself sideways, clawing at the ground, and the sound that came out of her wasn't a scream. It was something worse. Something that belonged to a trapped animal, not a grown woman. "No, please, I'll go. I'll leave. Don't." Caleb held both hands up, didn't touch her, didn't move. "I ain't him," he said. "Whoever did this, I ain't him." She kept shaking, her whole body locked up in the mud, trembling so hard her teeth clicked together. Then Maggie's voice came from behind him. Small, clear, steady as Sunday morning. "It's okay, lady. My papa don't hurt nobody. He won't even kill the spiders in my room. He catches them in a cup and puts them outside." The woman's eye shifted to the girl. Blonde hair under a too-big hat. Gap-toothed smile. Holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear hanging by a thread. The shaking slowed. Not much, but enough. Caleb waited, patient as fence posts. "Please," the woman whispered. Her voice came out broken, crushed, like somebody had taken it and wrung it out like a rag. "Please don't take me back to him." "I don't know who him is," Caleb said, "but you ain't going back to nobody. Not from here." She stared at him, searching, looking for the lie the way a person does when every truth they've ever been told turned out to be one. Then her body quit, all at once, like a rope that had been pulled too tight for too long, and finally just snapped. She went limp in the mud, and Caleb understood. She'd been running on pure fear, nothing else. And now that the fear had cracked, there was nothing left underneath to hold her up. He shrugged off his coat, wrapped it around her. When he lifted her, his stomach dropped. She weighed nothing. He could feel every rib, every bone in her shoulder. Whoever did this hadn't just beaten her. They'd been starving her first. "Maggie," he said, "up on the horse. We're going home." "Papa, is she gonna die?" "No, baby, she ain't gonna die." He said it like a fact, but inside his chest, he wasn't sure at all. Halfway home, the woman woke up screaming. It came out of nowhere. One second she was limp against his chest, the next she was thrashing, clawing at his arms, kicking against the horse so hard the mare spooked sideways. "Let me go! Let me go! Randall, please! I'm sorry! I won't run again. Please. Maggie grabbed the saddle horn with both hands. Papa! Caleb locked one arm around the woman and steadied the horse with the other. His voice came out calm, the way it did when a calf was tangled in barbed wire and fighting itself to death. You're not with him, you hear me? You're with Caleb Thornton. You're on my horse. My daughter's right here. Nobody's hurting you. Nobody. Her eyes flew open, the one good eye, wild, lost, not seeing the Wyoming sky or the open grass or the little girl gripping the saddle in front of her. Then she focused, saw Maggie's face. Maggie, who hadn't screamed, hadn't cried, just held on and looked at her with those steady brown eyes. The woman stopped fighting, her hands unclenched from Caleb's arms. She looked down at the half-moon marks her fingernails had dug into his skin, and something crumbled in her expression. I'm sorry, she breathed. I thought... I know what you thought, Caleb said. It's all right. You're safe. She pressed her forehead against his shoulder and went quiet. Caleb felt her tears soaking through his shirt. Warm, silent. Maggie reached back and put her small hand on the woman's knee. Didn't say anything, just left it there. They rode the rest of the way home without a word. Caleb laid her on his bed, pulled the quilt up. She grabbed his sleeve before he could step back. Don't leave me alone, she said. He'll find me. You're in my house. Nobody walks through my door without my say-so. He looked at Maggie. Sit with her, sweetheart. Maggie climbed right up on the bed, cross-legged, and held out her rabbit. This is Captain, she said. He's fought bears and outlaws, and one time a really mean chicken. You can hold him. He don't mind. The woman's swollen hand closed around the stuffed rabbit. She didn't speak, but her grip on Caleb's sleeve loosened, and he took that as permission to go. He rode for town. Doc Patterson was 63 years old, missing 2 fingers on his left hand from a sawmill accident in his 20s, and had a voice like gravel being poured into a tin bucket. He'd stitched up half the county and buried the other half. Nothing surprised him anymore, but when he came out of Caleb's bedroom and closed the door behind him, he sat down at the kitchen table and didn't speak for a full minute. Caleb stood against the wall, arms crossed, waiting. How bad? He said. Doc rubbed his 2-fingered hand across his face. 3 ribs broken, shoulder yanked out of the socket. Somebody shoved it back in, but they did it mean, not medical. Cuts on both arms. She was fighting back, Caleb. She fought hard. He paused. Bruises around her neck. Somebody choked her. More than once, from the layering. Caleb's boot shifted against the floor. That was all. But his knuckles went white where his arms crossed. There's more, Doc said quietly. She's starved. Not missed a few meals, starved. Deliberately. Over weeks, maybe longer. This wasn't a man losing his temper. This was a man running a campaign. The kitchen went silent. Through the cracked bedroom door, they could hear Maggie telling the woman about the time Captain the Rabbit fought a rattlesnake and won. She gonna make it? Caleb asked. Her body will. Doc put his spectacles back on, looked at Caleb with the kind of eyes that had seen too much lying down and not enough standing up. The rest, that's a longer road, and it ain't one you can walk for her. I ain't trying to walk it for her, just trying to make sure she's got somewhere safe to walk it. Doc studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded, slow. Rebecca would have dragged this woman into the house herself, he said. Wouldn't have even slowed the horse down. Caleb turned his face toward the window. Don't. I'm just saying, I know what you're saying. His voice went rough at the edges. This ain't about my wife. No, Doc agreed, standing up. He grabbed his bag. But it ain't entirely separate either. He headed for the door, then stopped. Caleb, whoever did this, he ain't done. Men like that don't quit. They circle back. You understand that? I understand it fine. Then you understand that when he comes, and he will come, he won't come swinging fists. He'll come with papers and lawyers and a story that makes him look like the grieving husband searching for his poor, troubled wife. Doc's gravel voice went hard. And some folks in this town will believe him, because he'll be wearing a better coat than you. Caleb uncrossed his arms. Let him wear what he wants. This is my land, my house, my door. Doc shook his head. You're as stubborn as your daddy was. My daddy lived to 87. Yeah. Doc pulled his hat on. And he got shot twice getting there. 3 days. The woman barely spoke. She drank the broth Caleb brought to the doorway. He never entered the room without announcing himself first. Never moved fast, never stood between her and the door. She flinched at the sound of his boots. She flinched at the sound of his voice. She flinched at the creak of the floorboards and the bang of the wind against the shutters. She did not flinch at Maggie. The girl spent hours beside her, talking about chickens, about the barn cat named Sergeant who only had one eye, about the creek where you could find smooth stones shaped like hearts if you looked long enough, about her mama, who was in heaven now, but used to make biscuits so good the pastor came to dinner 3 times a week just to get some. On the third morning, Caleb was pouring coffee when Maggie came padding out of the bedroom, still in her nightgown. Papa? Yeah, sweetheart. Eliza says she wants to talk to you, but she says if you're busy, it can wait. And she said to tell you she's sorry for being trouble. Caleb set the coffee pot down. She said her name's Eliza? Eliza Calloway. She told me last night. And Papa, she said Calloway's the name she was born with. She won't say the other one. Caleb looked at his daughter. 7 years old, barefoot, tangled hair, calm as a woman 3 times her age. Go feed the chickens, he said, and put shoes on. He went to the bedroom doorway, knocked on the frame even though the door was open. Eliza was sitting up for the first time. The quilt was pulled around her shoulders. Her face was still a ruin, but both eyes were open now, and what Caleb saw in them had changed. 3 days ago, those eyes held nothing but terror. Now the terror had company. Something harder. Something that looked like a decision being made. You don't owe me anything, he said. Not an explanation, not a name. Nothing. I know, Eliza said. And that's why I'm going to tell you. Because you didn't ask. She pulled the quilt tighter, drew a breath that hitched against her broken ribs. I was a teacher, she said, in St. Louis. Had my own classroom, 22 students. I was good at it. Her hands twisted in the fabric. Then I met Randall Prescott. He's a banker, wealthy, respected, the kind of man who holds doors open and says all the right things where people can hear him. He courted me for 6 months. Flowers every Tuesday, poetry on the porch. Every woman in the boarding house told me I was the luckiest girl in Missouri. She stopped, pressed her hand against her ribs. Caleb didn't move, didn't speak. I married him, she said. First time he hit me was our wedding night. Said I laughed too loud at the reception. Said a wife needed to understand her place. Her voice went flat, dead, like she was reading off a list. 2 years. 2 years of yes, sir, and no, sir, and I'm sorry, and please don't. 2 years of high collars to hide the marks. 2 years of... She stopped again. Not from pain this time. From something else. She was looking past Caleb, past the wall, past everything. at a place only she could see. Caleb let the silence sit. "I tried to leave 3 times," Eliza said, coming back. "First time, he caught me at the train station. Told everyone I'd had a nervous spell. Dragged me home by my arm, smiling the whole way." Her jaw tightened. "Second time, I made it to my sister's house in Kansas City. He showed up next morning, brought a sheriff and a doctor with papers already signed. Papers that said I was mentally unfit. My own sister." She stopped, swallowed hard. "My own sister stood there and watched them take me back. Because he wore a good suit and spoke with authority, and she believed him over me." Caleb's hand gripped the doorframe. He didn't trust himself to speak. "Third time was 6 days ago," Eliza said. "Stole money from his desk, bought a horse, rode west. Didn't have a plan, didn't care, just rode." She looked at Caleb directly. "He caught me on the second day, him and 3 hired men. They pulled me off the horse. Randall watched while they did it. He stood there in his good coat and his clean boots, and he watched." She held up her hands, fingernails torn, knuckles raw down to the meat. "After they left me, I crawled. 2 days, drank creek water, ate nothing. I crawled because I decided something, and it's the only thing I've decided for myself in 2 years." "What's that?" Caleb asked. His voice was barely there. "That if I die," she said, "it'll be in a place I chose, not a place he picked out for me." The bedroom was quiet. Somewhere outside, Maggie was singing to the chickens, off-key, something about a frog. "He'll come," Eliza said. "Randall doesn't lose. He doesn't forget. He has enough money to find anyone, anywhere. And when he comes, he won't come with fists. He'll come with a judge's order and a sheriff's badge and a story so clean you could eat off it." She looked past Caleb toward the front room, where Maggie's singing drifted through the open door. "You have a daughter," she said, and her voice cracked for the first time. Not from fear for herself, from fear for the little girl who'd handed her a one-eared rabbit and told her about a mean chicken. "I should leave tonight. I won't bring this to your door. I won't—" "You ain't going nowhere," Caleb said. He said it the way he said things that were true. No heat, no volume, just fact. "This is my land. That's my little girl. And you're in my house. Any man who rides up to my door meaning harm to anyone under this roof, I don't care if he's got a judge, a sheriff, and the governor of Missouri in his back pocket. He'll be dealing with me. And I ain't a man who deals gentle when it comes to my people." "I'm not your people," Eliza said. "You are now." The words landed in the room and stayed there. Eliza stared at him. Her battered lips trembled, her eyes filled, and she pressed her fist against her mouth. But the sob broke through anyway, raw and ugly and real. The kind of crying that lives in the body for years and only comes out when something cracks the wall open. Caleb didn't step toward her, didn't reach for her. He stood in that doorway, solid and still, and he gave her the only thing nobody had given her in 2 years: space to fall apart without being punished for it. When it passed, Eliza wiped her face with the back of her hand, looked at him with red, swollen, ruined eyes that held something new. Not trust, not yet. Something before trust, something that comes first. The belief that trust might be possible again. "You're a fool, Caleb Thornton," she said. Her voice was wrecked, but there was the faintest edge in it, something that might have been humor in another life. Caleb tipped his hat. "Been told that before, ma'am. Generally by people who turned out to be right." Her mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not yet. but the ghost of one, the memory that smiling was a thing a person could do. That evening, Maggie sat at the kitchen table, drawing pictures with a charcoal pencil, while Caleb cleaned his rifle. "Papa." "Yeah? Eliza's staying, right?" "For now. She needs to stay forever." Caleb looked up from the rifle. "That's not how it works, sweetheart." Maggie kept drawing. She didn't look up. "She needs us, and we need her too. We just don't know it yet." Mama would have said the same thing. Caleb set the rifle down. He looked at this girl, his girl, Rebecca's girl. 7 years old with dirt under her fingernails and tangled hair, and her mother's way of seeing straight through to the center of things. "When'd you get so smart?" he asked. "Mama taught me," Maggie said, "before she went to the angels." Caleb turned toward the window, pressed his knuckles against the frame, and stood there until his breathing steadied. In the bedroom, Eliza was sleeping. Captain the Rabbit was tucked under her chin. One hand rested on the quilt, palm up, fingers uncurled for the first time in 3 days. And somewhere east of here, past the open range, past the rail lines, past the towns that knew his name and feared his money, a man named Randall Prescott was asking questions, offering rewards, hiring men. Caleb checked the rifle one more time, loaded it, leaned it by the door. Then he blew out the lamp and sat in the dark, listening to his daughter breathe in one room and a stranger breathe in another. And he thought about the kind of man who starves a woman on purpose, the kind of man who stands in a good coat and watches while 3 men beat a woman half to death. The kind of man who was coming. Caleb's hands rested on his knees, steady, still. He'd be ready. The first person in town to find out about Eliza was Nettie Farrow. And that was because Nettie Farrow found out about everything. She showed up at Caleb's door on the 4th morning, carrying a basket that smelled like heaven, and wearing an expression that could have cut glass. 61 years old, built like a fence post wrapped in calico, and she ran the only boarding house in Ridgeway with the iron hand of a woman who'd buried 2 husbands and didn't plan on wasting tears on a third. "Caleb Thornton," she said, pushing past him before he could speak. "Doc Patterson came into my place last night looking like he'd swallowed a hornet. Wouldn't say why. So I asked Martha at the general store, and she said you rode into town 4 days ago like the devil was chasing you, and bought enough bandages to wrap a mule." She set the basket on his table. "Now, who's hurt, and why wasn't I told?" Caleb opened his mouth. Nettie held up one finger. "And don't you dare say it's none of my business. I changed your diapers, Caleb Mercer Thornton. Everything in this county is my business." He told her. Not all of it. Just enough. "A woman. Found her in the creek bed. Beaten bad. Husband did it." Nettie's face didn't change while he talked, but her hands did. They went still. Nettie's hands were never still. She was always wiping a counter, folding a cloth, straightening something that didn't need straightening. When her hands stopped moving, it meant something inside her had caught fire. "Where is she?" Nettie said. It wasn't a question. "Bedroom. Maggie's with her." Nettie picked up the basket and walked toward the bedroom door. She knocked twice, soft. "Honey?" she said. Her voice changed completely. The iron was gone. What came out was warm flannel and chamomile tea. "My name's Nettie Farrow. I'm an old busybody who can't mind her own affairs. And I brought you biscuits and jam, and a clean dress that might fit if we pin it. Can I come in?" Silence from inside the room. Then Maggie's voice. "Come in, Miss Nettie. Eliza's awake. She's just scared of new people on account of a bad man hurt her." Caleb closed his eyes. Nettie went in. She was in there for 2 hours. When she came out, her eyes were red, but her jaw was set in a way Caleb recognized. It was the same look she'd worn when the bank tried to foreclose on the widow Crawford's house, and Nettie had marched into the bank president's office and come out 40 minutes later with the deed in her hand. Nobody ever found out what she said in there. Nobody asked. "That woman," Nettie said to Caleb, "is staying right where she is until she's strong enough to decide for herself where she wants to be. I'll be back tomorrow with soup and proper undergarments, and if you breathe a word of this to anyone before she's ready, I will end you." "Yes, ma'am." Nettie paused at the door. "Caleb, you did a good thing bringing her here." "Didn't do anything anyone else wouldn't have done." Nettie looked at him with eyes that had seen 61 years of people doing exactly nothing when something hard needed doing. "We both know that isn't true," she said, and she left. That night, for the first time, Eliza came out of the bedroom. Caleb was at the stove heating broth. Maggie was on the floor playing with Sergeant, the one-eyed barn cat who'd wandered inside and refused to leave. He heard the floorboards creak and turned to see Eliza standing in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, wearing the dress Nettie had brought. It hung loose on her, pinned at the waist, but it was clean. Her hair was combed, her face was still a wreck of bruises, but both eyes were open and clear. She looked at the kitchen like she was memorizing it. The stove, the table, the window, the little girl on the floor with the cat. "I'd like to sit at the table," she said, "if that's all right." Caleb pulled out a chair. "Course it is." She walked to it slowly, sat down, put both hands flat on the table like she was testing whether it was real. Maggie looked up from the cat. "You look pretty," she said. "That dress has flowers on it." Eliza looked down at the faded print. "I suppose it does." Caleb set a bowl of broth in front of her, sat down across the table, not too close. Maggie climbed into the chair between them, and Sergeant jumped into her lap. They ate in silence for a while. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when people are too tired for pretending and too honest for small talk. Then Eliza said, "Your daughter told me about your wife." Caleb's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. "She said her name was Rebecca, that she made the best biscuits in Wyoming, that she used to sing while she hung laundry, and that she died in the winter and it snowed the day of the funeral, and Maggie thinks that was God crying." Caleb set the spoon down. "Maggie talks a lot," he said. "She talks the right amount," Eliza said. "She talks like someone who is loved enough to believe the world is safe." She looked at Caleb. "That's rare. That means you and your wife did something right." Something shifted in Caleb's chest. A wall he'd built 3 years ago developed a crack he didn't know how to patch. "She was better than me," he said. "Rebecca. Better at all of it. The house, Maggie, being a person in the world. When she died, I just—" He stopped, shook his head. "I ain't good at this part." "At what part?" "Talking." He almost smiled. "About things that matter." Eliza studied him across the table. "You carried me off the ground," she said. "You gave me your bed. You ride to the doorway and knock before you enter a room in your own house. You sleep in the barn in June so I can feel safe behind a locked door." She paused. "You talk fine, Caleb. You just don't use words to do it." Caleb looked at her. Really looked. Past the bruises and the swelling and the damage, and for half a second, he saw the woman underneath all of it. The teacher. The person who'd been buried alive under 2 years of fists and fear and was still, somehow, sitting at his table, making observations that cut straight to the bone. He looked away first, cleared his throat, picked up his spoon. "Biscuits are in the basket if you want one," he said. "Nettie made 'em. They ain't as good as Rebecca's, but Don't tell Nettie I said that. Eliza reached for the basket, and her hand was steady. The next morning, Caleb rode into town to see Sheriff Tom Braddock. Braddock was 45, lean as a whip, and had a mustache that looked like it had been drawn on with a charcoal pencil. He'd been sheriff of Ridgeway for 11 years, which in Wyoming territory meant he'd dealt with cattle thieves, claim jumpers, bar fights, one attempted bank robbery carried out by two brothers so drunk they tried to rob the feed store by mistake, and exactly 0 situations involving a wealthy banker from St. Louis hunting his wife across state lines. He listened to Caleb without interrupting, leaned back in his chair, tugged his mustache the way he always did when he was thinking. And she says this man, Prescott, he'll come. He'll come, Caleb said. She knows him. Says he doesn't quit. Braddock nodded slowly. The law is complicated here, Caleb. You know that. A husband's got legal claim to his wife. If he shows up with papers, she ain't property, Tom. I know that. You know that. But the law in Missouri might see it different. And if he's got a judge in his pocket and a doctor willing to sign papers saying she's unfit, Braddock held up his hand before Caleb could speak. I ain't saying I'd hand her over. I'm saying we need to be smart about this. If he comes with legal weight, I need something to push back with. Like what? Witnesses. People who've seen what he did to her. Doc Patterson's examination. A sworn statement from the woman herself, if she's willing. Braddock leaned forward. And it wouldn't hurt to have folks in this town who know her, who can stand up in front of a judge if it comes to that, and say she's not crazy, she's not unfit. She's a woman who was beaten by her husband and had the guts to run. Caleb sat with that for a moment. There's another thing, Braddock said. If this Prescott is what you say he is, rich, connected, used to getting what he wants, he might not come through official channels first. He might send men ahead, feel things out, see who she's with, see what he's dealing with. I thought about that. I figured you had. Braddock stood up, walked to the window. I'll keep my ears open. Any strangers come through town asking about a woman, I'll know about it before they finish their first drink. He turned back to Caleb. But Caleb, you can't shoot this man. You understand? No matter what he's done. You shoot a wealthy banker from St. Louis, you'll hang. And that little girl of yours will have no one. Caleb's jaw worked. I hear you. Do you? Because I've known you 20 years, and I've seen that look in your eyes exactly once before. And it was right before you broke Hank Morrison's arm in 3 places for kicking a dog. Hank Morrison deserved what he got. He did. But a dog ain't a federal case. Braddock put his hand on Caleb's shoulder. Be smart. Be patient. Let me do my job. And if it goes sideways, then we'll handle it together. But legal. You understand? Legal. Caleb put his hat on. I understand, Tom. He didn't promise. Braddock noticed. Neither of them mentioned it. A week passed. Then 2. Eliza grew stronger every day, and the changes came in small things that only someone paying attention would notice. She started eating without being asked. She walked from the bedroom to the kitchen without holding the wall. She washed her own dishes. She brushed her own hair. She stood on the porch one morning and let the sun hit her face and didn't flinch when a horse whinnied in the distance. Maggie followed her everywhere. Eliza, look at this rock. Eliza, do you know how to braid hair? Eliza, can you read? Will you read to me? Papa reads to me, but he does the voices wrong. He makes the princess sound like a cowboy. That's because all the princesses I know are cowboys, Caleb said from the porch. Eliza read to Maggie every night. She had a voice for it, once the damage healed enough for her to speak without wincing. Clear and warm and changing with each character. Maggie was asleep within minutes most nights, but Caleb noticed that Eliza kept reading for a while after, her voice dropping low. Not for the child anymore, but for herself. Like she was remembering who she used to be. One evening, Eliza asked about the schoolhouse. Caleb was mending a bridle. He looked up. "What about it?" "Maggie said the town doesn't have a teacher, that the last one left in the spring and nobody's replaced her." "That's true." Eliza's hands folded in her lap. "If I'm going to stay, and I'm not saying I am, but if I am, I need to earn my way. I won't be kept. Not by anyone. Not ever again." Caleb set the bridle down. "Nobody's keeping you, Eliza." "I know. That's why I'm still here." She met his eyes. "I'm a teacher, Caleb. It's the only thing I ever was that was mine. Before Randall. Before all of it. I stood in front of a classroom and I was good. I was real good. And I'd like to be that again." "Then be that again," Caleb said. "I'll talk to Reverend Oakes. He runs the school board, such as it is." "What if people ask questions? About where I came from? About these?" She gestured at her face. The bruises had faded to yellow and green, but they were still visible, still a map of what had been done. "People will ask," Caleb said, "and you'll tell them what you want to tell them. Nothing more. This town's full of people who came from somewhere else, running from something else. Half the ranchers out here changed their names before they crossed the Missouri. Nobody's going to hold your past against you." Eliza looked at him for a long time. "You really believe that?" "I believe what I see. And what I see is a town that needs a teacher, and a teacher who needs a town." Reverend Samuel Oakes was a thin man with kind eyes and ink-stained fingers from writing sermons that nobody listened to, but everyone agreed were well-intentioned. He met Eliza in Nettie's boarding house parlor on a Tuesday afternoon, and within 10 minutes he'd forgotten he was supposed to be conducting an interview. "Ma'am," he said, leaning forward in his chair, "are you telling me you've actually read Emerson?" "Read him, taught him, and argued with him in the margins," Eliza said. The Reverend looked at Caleb, who was standing by the door with his hat in his hands. "Where on earth did you find this woman?" "Creek bed," Caleb said. The Reverend blinked. "Well, the Lord works in mysterious ways."
"She starts Monday," Nettie said from the doorway, where she'd been listening to the entire conversation while pretending to dust a shelf that was already clean. "And she'll need books, real books, not that pile of moth-eaten nonsense we've been torturing those children with."
Reverend Oakes opened his mouth.
"Monday,"
Nettie repeated. "Monday it is," the Reverend said. Eliza started teaching on a Monday morning in July. 9 children, ages 6 through 14, in a one-room schoolhouse that smelled like chalk dust and old pine. Maggie sat in the front row, beaming, as if she'd personally arranged the whole thing. And Eliza taught. She taught the way she'd always taught, with fire and patience, and a refusal to let a single child believe they were too dumb or too poor or too anything to learn. She taught reading to the youngest ones, and mathematics to the oldest, and history to everyone in between. And by the end of the first week, children who had spent the spring throwing rocks at each other were arguing about whether George Washington was braver than Daniel Boone. The parents noticed. They talked. The talk was mostly good, but not all of it. Martha Greer, who ran the general store with her husband and had an opinion on everything and a kind word for nothing, cornered Nettie outside the church on Sunday. "I'm just asking questions," Martha said, in the tone of voice that meant she was about to say something ugly and wanted permission first. "Nobody knows where she came from. Nobody knows her family. She shows up half dead on Caleb Thornton's ranch, and now she's teaching our children? It don't sit right, Nettie." "What don't sit right is that mouth of yours, Martha." "I'm serious. What if that husband of hers shows up? What if there's trouble? We've got children to think about." Nettie stepped close enough for Martha to smell the lavender soap she used. "That woman," she said quietly, "crawled through the dirt for 2 days after 3 men beat her near to death on her husband's orders. She crawled because she decided she'd rather die in a ditch than spend one more day being owned by a man with clean hands and a black heart. And now she's standing in front of your children, teaching them to read, which is more than you've ever done for this town's education. So I suggest you take your questions and your concerns and your just askings, and you fold them up real small, and you put them somewhere I don't have to listen to them. Are we clear?" Martha's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She walked away without another word, but the seed was planted, and seeds, as Nettie knew better than most, had a way of growing in the dark. 3 weeks after Eliza started teaching, a man rode into Ridgeway on a gray horse. He was young, clean-shaven, wore a bowler hat and a city coat that had no business being in Wyoming. He tied his horse at the saloon, ordered a whiskey, and started asking questions. Casual questions, the kind a man asks when he wants to seem like he's making conversation and not conducting a search. Nice town. Quiet. The kind of place a person could disappear if they wanted to. The bartender wiped a glass and said nothing. "I'm looking for a woman," the man said. He pulled a photograph from his vest pocket, slid it across the bar. "My employer's wife. She's not well. Took off a few weeks back during one of her episodes. Family's worried sick." The bartender looked at the photograph, looked at the man, kept wiping. "Can't say I've seen her," the bartender said. The man smiled. "Of course." He left a $20 gold piece on the bar. "If you do see her, my employer would be grateful. Very grateful. There'd be a reward for anyone who helps bring her home safe." He finished his whiskey, walked out, rode east. The bartender picked up the gold piece, looked at it. Then he walked 3 doors down to the sheriff's office and set it on Braddock's desk. Braddock looked at the coin, then at the bartender. "Young fella," the bartender said. "City coat, bowler hat. Had a photograph of a woman, asking if anyone had seen her. Said she was his employer's wife. Said she wasn't well. Said there'd be a reward." Braddock picked up the coin, turned it over in his fingers. "What'd you tell him?" "Told him I hadn't seen her." "That the truth?" The bartender looked at Braddock for a long moment. "I've been pouring drinks in this town for 9 years, Tom. I've seen a lot of men come in looking for women. Some of them are husbands looking for wives. Some of them are trouble looking for a target. That fellow with the bowler hat? He wasn't worried about no woman's well-being. He was scouting." Braddock nodded. He put the coin in his desk drawer, stood up, put his hat on. "I need to talk to Caleb Thornton," he said. He rode out to the ranch that afternoon. Found Caleb splitting wood behind the barn. Told him about the man with the bowler hat. Caleb buried the axe in the stump and didn't pull it out. "How long ago?" he said. 3 hours. Rode east. He's reporting back." "That's what I figure," Braddock said. "Which means Prescott knows where she is. Or he will soon." Caleb stared at the axe in the stump. His hands hung at his sides. Still. "How long?" he said. "Could be days, could be a week. Depends on how far east Prescott is. Depends on how fast he moves." Braddock shifted in his saddle. "I sent a wire to the U.S. Marshal's office in Cheyenne. Told them we might have a situation. Asked if there's any federal paper on Prescott. Haven't heard back yet. And if there ain't, then we do this the hard way." Braddock looked down at his friend. "Legal, Caleb. I meant what I said." Caleb pulled the axe from the stump, swung it into the next log. The crack echoed off the barn wall. "Go tell Eliza," Braddock said. She deserves to know. I know she does, Caleb said. That's what I'm afraid of. He found her on the porch that evening. Maggie was inside, asleep. The house was quiet. Eliza was sitting in the chair Caleb had built last week. Built it without saying why, just set it on the porch one morning like it had always been there. She looked at his face and knew. He found me, she said, not a question. Caleb sat down on the porch step. Not yet. But someone came to town asking about you. Young man. City clothes. Had your photograph. Eliza's hands gripped the arms of the chair. Her knuckles went white. But her voice stayed level. That's how Randall works. He sends someone first. To look. To listen. To find out who's protecting me and how hard it'll be to take me back. Braddock knows, Caleb said. He's on it. Sent a wire to the marshals. The marshals won't matter. Eliza's voice was quiet, hard. Randall will come with papers, Caleb. Legal papers. A judge's order. A doctor's signature. He'll stand in front of your sheriff and your town, and he'll say, I'm his wife, and I'm mentally unfit, and he has every legal right to take me home. And your sheriff will have to choose between the law and what's right. And those aren't always the same thing. Caleb looked at her. Tom Braddock's a good man. I don't doubt it. Eliza's grip on the chair didn't loosen. But good men lose to rich men every day in this country. You know that. The quiet stretched between them. Somewhere out past the fence line, a coyote called, and another answered. I should run, Eliza said. Tonight. Take a horse. Head north. If I'm gone when he arrives, he'll have no reason to— No, Caleb said. Caleb, no. He turned to face her. His voice was low and hard and left no room. You ran 3 times. 3 times he caught you. Running's not the answer. Standing is.
Easy for you to say. You're not the one he wants. Caleb held her gaze. You're right. I ain't. But I'm the one who's here. And I ain't moving. He paused. Neither are you. Eliza's eyes filled. She blinked it back. Refused it. I won't let him hurt your daughter, she whispered. I'd die first. Nobody's dying, Caleb said. And nobody's running. We're going to stand right here on this porch, on this land, and when Randall Prescott rides up to my gate, he's going to find out what happens when a man with money meets a woman with a town behind her. Eliza looked at him. A town behind me? Caleb, I've been here a month. These people don't owe me anything. You taught Martha Greer's boy to read in 3 weeks. Nettie Farrow would walk through fire for you, and she's known you less time than that. Doc Patterson checks on you every Tuesday and won't take a dime for it. Reverend Oakes told me last Sunday that you're the best thing that's happened to this town since the railroad came through. He leaned forward. You think you're alone in this, Eliza? You ain't. You stopped being alone the day my daughter handed you a stuffed rabbit and decided you were family. A tear broke loose, ran down Eliza's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. I'm scared, she said. Not of the hitting. I've survived the hitting. I'm scared he'll take me back, and I'll disappear again. That the woman sitting on this porch right now, the one who teaches children and reads books and drinks coffee in the morning and almost feels like a human being again, I'm scared she'll go away and the other one will come back. The quiet one. The one who says, yes, sir, and flinches at shadows and doesn't remember what her own voice sounds like. Caleb reached out, slow, careful. He put his hand on the arm of her chair, not on her, near her, close enough to touch if she wanted, far enough to leave if she didn't. That woman on this porch, he said, she ain't going anywhere. I guarantee it.
Eliza looked at his hand,
looked at his face, and after a long, still moment, she moved her hand from the chair arm and set it on top of his. She didn't speak. Neither did he. They sat like that on the porch while the dark came down and the coyotes called across the valley. And if you'd ridden past Caleb Thornton's ranch that night, you'd have seen nothing but a man and a woman sitting together in silence, and you'd have thought it was the most ordinary thing in the world. It wasn't. It was the bravest thing either of them had ever done. Caleb's hand was still warm from hers when the dog started barking at dawn. He was out of bed before his eyes were fully open, grabbed the rifle by the door, crossed the front room in 3 steps, and looked through the window. 2 riders, coming up the road slow. No hurry, no fear. The kind of slow that meant they knew exactly where they were going and didn't care who saw them coming. Caleb cocked the rifle. Behind him, Eliza's voice came from the bedroom doorway. "How many?" "2. Stay inside." "Caleb." Her voice was steady, hard, the voice of a woman who'd stopped being surprised by bad things. "Is it him?" Caleb watched the riders. The one in front was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a coat that cost more than Caleb's horse. The one behind him was the young man from before, bowler hat, city clothes, but this time he had a holster on his hip that hadn't been there the first visit. "No," Caleb said, "but they're his." He stepped onto the porch, set the rifle against the railing where it could be seen, crossed his arms, and waited. The tall man pulled up 20 feet from the porch, didn't dismount. He had a face like a closed ledger, everything calculated, nothing given away for free. He looked at Caleb, looked at the rifle, looked at the cabin. "Mr. Thornton," the man said. His voice was East Coast, polished, the kind of voice that had been trained to sound reasonable while saying unreasonable things. "My name is Charles Dutton. I'm an attorney representing Mr. Randall Prescott of St. Louis." "I know who you represent," Caleb said. "State your business and get off my land." Dutton smiled, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "I'm here on a matter of some delicacy. Mr. Prescott's wife, Mrs. Eliza Prescott, left their home several weeks ago during a period of mental distress. Mr. Prescott is deeply concerned for her welfare. We have reason to believe she may be in this area." Caleb didn't blink. "Never heard of her." Dutton reached into his coat. Caleb's hand moved toward the rifle. "Just a document, Mr. Thornton." Dutton pulled out a folded paper, held it up. "This is a court order from the 8th Circuit Court in Missouri, signed by Judge William Harker, authorizing the return of Mrs. Eliza Prescott to the custody of her husband. It also includes a medical evaluation by Dr. Leonard Marsh, certifying that Mrs. Prescott suffers from hysteria and is a danger to herself and others." He extended the paper toward Caleb. Caleb didn't take it. "You're in Wyoming territory," Caleb said. "Missouri paper don't mean much out here." "It's a federal court order, Mr. Thornton. It means quite a lot everywhere." Dutton's smile didn't waver. "We're not looking for trouble. Mr. Prescott simply wants his wife returned safely. He's prepared to be generous to anyone who assists in that effort." He paused. "Very generous." The front door opened behind Caleb. Eliza stepped onto the porch. Caleb turned. "I told you to stay inside." "And I told you I'm done hiding," Eliza said. She looked at Dutton. Her face was pale. Her hands shook at her sides. But she stood straight, and she didn't step behind Caleb, and she didn't lower her eyes. "Hello, Charles." Dutton's composure cracked, just for a second, just enough to show he hadn't expected her to come out, hadn't expected her to speak, hadn't expected her to look at him like that.
like a woman standing on her own feet instead of cowering behind a locked door. "Mrs. Prescott," he said, recovering fast. "You look well. Your husband will be relieved." "My name is Calloway," Eliza said, "and my husband can rot." Dutton's smile thinned. "Mrs. Prescott, forgive me, but the court has determined that you are not currently in a fit state to make decisions regarding your own welfare. This order authorizes—" "That order," Eliza said, "was signed by a judge who plays poker with Randall every Thursday night and a doctor who's never met me." She took a step forward. "I am not insane, Mr. Dutton. I am not hysterical. I am a woman who was beaten by her husband for 2 years and left to die in the wilderness when I tried to leave. And if you think I'm going back to that house, you are out of your mind." Dutton looked at the young man behind him. The young man's hand rested on his holster. "I understand you're upset," Dutton said, turning back to Eliza with practiced sympathy. "But the law is clear. A husband has the right to beat his wife?" Eliza's voice rose. "To starve her? To choke her? To have 3 men hold her down and break her ribs? Is that in your court order too, Mr. Dutton? Is that what Judge Harker signed off on?" Dutton said nothing. Caleb stepped forward. One step, that was enough. "You heard the lady. Now I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to take that paper and your hired gun, and you're going to ride back to wherever you came from. And you're going to tell Randall Prescott that his wife is not here. She's gone. She disappeared. You couldn't find her. And if he wants to come look for himself, he's welcome to try. Mr. Thornton, I strongly advise you to get off my property before I stop being polite about it." The young man behind Dutton moved his hand on the holster. Caleb picked up the rifle. Didn't aim it, just held it. Easy. Comfortable. The way a man holds something he's used 1,000 times. "Son," Caleb said to the young man, "don't." The young man looked at Dutton. Dutton looked at Caleb, at the rifle, at Eliza, who hadn't moved, hadn't flinched, hadn't stepped back a single inch. "We'll be back," Dutton said, "with the sheriff." "You do that," Caleb said. They rode out. Caleb watched until they were past the fence line, past the road, past the ridge. Then he set the rifle down and his hands started shaking. He gripped the porch railing and held on until it stopped. Eliza was still standing where she'd been. Her face was white, her whole body trembled, but her eyes were dry. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what? Standing up for yourself?" Caleb shook his head. "Don't you ever apologize for that. They'll come back with the sheriff. They'll come back with that court order and Braddock will have to—" "Braddock will do what's right," Caleb said. But even as he said it, he heard Eliza's words from the night before. "Good men lose to rich men every day in this country." He needed to get to town. He needed to get there first. Maggie appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Who were those men, Papa?" "Nobody important," Caleb said. Eliza looked at the little girl. Then she knelt down, right there on the porch, and she opened her arms. Maggie walked into them without a word. It was the first time Eliza had touched the child. The first time she'd initiated contact with anyone since the creek bed. She held Maggie against her chest and closed her eyes, and Caleb saw her lips move. A prayer. A promise. Something she was saying to herself that she needed to hear out loud. Caleb rode hard for town. He found Braddock at his desk, already reading a telegram. "I know," Braddock said before Caleb spoke. "Dutton stopped here first, showed me the court order." He looked up. "It's real, Caleb. Federal court. Signed and sealed." "You're not serious." I'm telling you what it is.
I'm not telling you what I'm going to do about it. Braddock stood up. I sent a wire to Cheyenne 2 weeks ago asking about Prescott. Got the answer this morning. He held up the telegram. Randall Prescott is under investigation by a federal prosecutor in Missouri. Fraud, embezzlement, and there's an open inquiry into the death of a domestic servant in his household last year. A woman named Ruth Adler, found at the bottom of a staircase. Coroner ruled it accidental. Prosecutor doesn't agree. Caleb's blood went cold. He killed someone. Nobody's proved it yet, but the investigation is active, which means Prescott's court order might not be worth the paper it's printed on, if we can get a federal marshal involved before Prescott gets here himself. How long? Braddock put his hat on. Marshal's office says they can have a man here in 10 days, maybe less. And if Prescott comes before that? Then we hold the line, Tom Braddock said. And we pray it holds. Caleb went to Nettie next. Found her in the boarding house kitchen, elbow deep in bread dough. I heard, she said before he opened his mouth. Martha Greer saw the lawyer ride through town. Told half the county before lunch. Of course she did. Nettie punched the dough, hard. I need you to listen to me, Caleb. That woman has spent the last month building something in this town. The children love her. The parents, most of them, respect her. Reverend Oakes thinks she hung the moon. She punched the dough again. But fear is a powerful thing. And when that lawyer comes back with a court order and a story about a sick wife and a worried husband, some of these people are going to fold. Martha Greer's already whispering. Others will follow.
What do we do?
We get there first. Nettie wiped flour from her hands. Church social, this Sunday. Eliza tells her story. Her words, her voice. In front of the whole town. Before Prescott can tell his version.
She won't want to, Caleb said.
You don't know what you're asking her to do. I know exactly what I'm asking her to do.
Nettie looked at him. I'm asking her to stand up in front of people who matter and tell the truth. It's the hardest thing in the world, and it's the only thing that works. Caleb brought it to Eliza that evening. She was reading to Maggie on the porch, the girl's head in her lap, Captain the Rabbit wedged between them. He told her about the telegram, about the investigation, about the marshal, about the 10 days. Then he told her about the church social. Eliza's hand stopped moving in Maggie's hair. She stared at the floor of the porch for a long time. You want me to stand in front of this town, she said, and tell them what he did to me. I'm not asking you to do anything, Caleb said. Nettie thinks... Nettie's right. Eliza's voice was flat, quiet. If Randall gets here first and tells them I'm crazy, they'll believe him. He's believable. That's what makes him dangerous.
He looks like the man you'd want your daughter to marry. She paused. I looked at him once and saw everything I wanted. A home, safety, a man who'd take care of me. She looked at Caleb. I was wrong about all of it, every single thing. And I married him anyway, because I wanted it to be true more than I wanted to see what was real. You were fooled. That ain't the same as being wrong. Isn't it? No. Caleb's voice was firm. A man who fools people on purpose, that's his sin, not yours. You didn't fail by trusting. He failed by being unworthy of it. Eliza's eyes filled. She blinked, held it. I'll do it, she said. The church social. I'll tell them. She looked down at Maggie, sleeping in her lap. But Caleb, when I tell this story, people are going to look at me different. Some of them are going to pity me. Some of them are going to blame me. And some of them are going to think I'm lying. Because that's what people do when the truth is ugly enough. I need to know that you'll still look at me the same. Caleb leaned forward in his chair. Eliza,
I pulled you out of the mud with your face beaten in and your bones showing through your dress. I've watched you learn to walk without flinching and eat without permission and read to my daughter like the world is still a place worth believing in." He held her gaze. "Nothing you say in that church is going to change the way I see you. Nothing." Eliza pressed her lips together, nodded once, hard. Sunday came like a verdict. The church was full, every seat taken, people standing against the walls. Nettie had spread the word, carefully, strategically, with the precision of a military campaign. She'd told the right people just enough to make them curious, and not enough to let them form opinions before they heard it from the source. Reverend Oakes opened with a prayer. Then he stepped aside. Eliza stood up from the front pew. She walked to the front of the church and turned to face the town of Ridgway, Wyoming. And for one terrible second, Caleb thought she was going to collapse. Her face went white. Her hands gripped the edge of the pulpit. Her eyes went to the door, and he knew she was calculating the distance, measuring the escape route. Doing the math, the 2 years of survival had hardwired into her brain. Then Maggie said, from the front row, clear as a bell, "You can do it, Eliza." Eliza closed her eyes, opened them. "My name is Eliza Calloway," she said. Her voice shook, but it carried. "Some of you know me as the teacher at the schoolhouse. Some of you know me as the woman Caleb Thornton found in the creek bed a month ago." She took a breath. "I'm going to tell you how I got there, and I'm going to ask you to believe me. Not because I can prove it, but because I'm standing here and I'm telling you the truth. And that's the hardest thing I've ever done." She told them everything. The courtship, the wedding, the first blow, the years of hiding, the 3 escapes, the sister who turned her away, the doctor who signed papers he'd never earned the right to sign, the final beating, the crawling. She didn't cry. Her voice cracked twice, but she kept going. She told it plain and straight, the way you tell something when you've carried it so long that the weight of it has worn the edges smooth. When she finished, the church was silent. Caleb looked at the faces around him. He saw tears. He saw anger. He saw shock. He saw Martha Greer in the 3rd row with her hand over her mouth and her eyes wide and wet. And then Nettie Farrow stood up. "I believe her," Nettie said, loud, clear, daring anyone to disagree. Doc Patterson stood up next. "I treated her injuries. They're consistent with everything she's described. I'll swear to it in front of any judge who asks." Sheriff Braddock stood. "I've received a federal telegram confirming that Randall Prescott is under investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and a suspicious death in his household." A murmur went through the church. People looked at each other, shifted in their seats. Then a voice from the back. Frank Greer, Martha's husband. Big man, quiet, never said much about anything. "If that man comes to this town," Frank said, "he'll have to go through more than just Caleb Thornton." Another voice, old Pete Dawson, who owned the feed store and hadn't made a speech since 1864. "I ain't much for fightin'," he said, "but I taught my daughters that a man who hits a woman ain't a man at all, and I meant it." One by one, voice by voice, the town of Ridgway stood up. Not all of them. Martha Greer sat in her pew and said nothing, and 2 or 3 others kept their eyes on the floor. But enough, more than enough. Eliza stood at the pulpit and watched it happen, and something broke open in her chest that had been locked shut for 2 years. Not trust exactly, something bigger. The realization that she had walked into a room full of strangers and told them the worst thing that had ever happened to her, and they hadn't turned away. They'd stood up. Caleb caught her eye from the back of the church. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just looked at her the way he'd looked at her since the first day. Steady. Present. The same. She almost broke right there. Almost. Instead, she straightened her spine and said, "Thank you." And she walked back to her seat and sat down, and Maggie climbed into her lap and whispered, "I told you." They walked out of the church into the Sunday heat, and Nettie grabbed Caleb's arm. "That was the first battle," Nettie said. "The real one's coming." "I know." Nettie looked toward the east road. "So does he," she said. The telegram arrived Tuesday morning. Braddock brought it to the ranch himself. Caleb read it standing on the porch. 3 sentences. Departing St. Louis Monday. Stop. Arriving Ridgeway by end of week. Stop. Bringing legal authority and sufficient force to recover my property. Stop. Caleb read it twice. His hand tightened on the paper until it crumpled. "My property," he said. Braddock nodded. "He's not even pretending anymore." Caleb handed the telegram to Eliza. She read it. Her face didn't change. She folded it neatly, set it on the porch railing, and looked out toward the road. "Friday," she said. "Maybe Saturday, depending on the rail connections." "Marshall's still 4 days out," Braddock said. "Best case." Eliza nodded. "Then we have 3 days to get ready for a man who's spent his whole life making sure the world bends to him." She looked at Caleb. "And we have to make sure it doesn't. Not here. Not this time." Caleb looked at this woman, this teacher, this survivor, this person who'd crawled through the dirt for 2 days and stood up in a church and told the truth to strangers and was now standing on his porch doing math on the timeline of her own destruction with the calm of a general planning a battle. And he understood something he should have understood weeks ago. He wasn't protecting her. They were protecting each other. "What do you need?" he asked. Eliza turned to Braddock. "I need to write a statement. A legal one. Everything he did, dates, witnesses, the name of every person in St. Louis who saw bruises and said nothing. I need Doc Patterson's medical report in writing. And I need you to send another wire to Cheyenne, not to the marshal, to the federal prosecutor investigating Randall." Braddock raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because the prosecutor wants Randall Prescott behind bars. And a wife willing to testify against her husband is the one thing money can't buy." She paused. "Tell them I'll testify. To everything. The beatings, the fraud, the servant who fell down the stairs. I'll tell them what I know, and I'll swear to it under oath." "Eliza," Caleb said quietly, "if you testify against him, he'll never stop coming for me." "I know." Eliza's jaw set. "He's never going to stop anyway, Caleb. That telegram proves it. I can spend the rest of my life running, or I can turn around and fight." She looked at him with eyes that had no fear left in them. All the fear had been used up. What was left was something else entirely. "I choose to fight." Caleb looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded once, turned to Braddock. "Send the wire," he said. Braddock tipped his hat, rode for town. Caleb and Eliza stood on the porch. The heat pressed down. Somewhere inside, Maggie was singing to Captain the Rabbit. "Are you afraid?" Caleb asked. "Terrified," Eliza said. "But I'm done letting fear make my decisions." He looked at her. She looked at him, and something passed between them that neither of them named, because naming it would have made it fragile, and fragile was the one thing they couldn't afford to be. Not yet. Not with Randall Prescott 3 days out and closing fast. Randall Prescott arrived on a Friday. Not Saturday, not end of week. Friday morning. 2 days early, because Randall Prescott was the kind of man who told you one thing and did another, and he'd been doing it his whole life. Caleb was in the barn when he heard the horses. Not 2 this time, 5. He set down the pitchfork and walked to the barn door and looked out, and his chest went cold. 5 riders, coming up the main road into Ridgeway. The one in front rode a black horse and wore a gray suit and a silk cravat, and sat in the saddle like a man who'd taken riding lessons instead of learning from need. Behind him, Dutton, the lawyer. Behind Dutton, the young man with the bowler hat. And behind them, 2 more men Caleb had never seen. Big, armed,
riding like men who got paid to ride toward trouble, not away from it. Caleb crossed the yard to the house. Eliza was at the kitchen table helping Maggie with her letters. She looked up when he came through the door, and she knew. She always knew. She could read his face the way she could read a book. Fast, accurate, without needing to go back over the words. "He's here," she said. Caleb nodded. 5 men, coming into town. Eliza's hand tightened on the pencil. Then she set it down, carefully, precisely. The way she did everything now, with the deliberate control of a person who'd learned that losing control meant losing everything. Maggie looked between them. "Is it the bad man?" Caleb knelt in front of his daughter. "I need you to go to Miss Nettie's, right now. Can you do that for me?" Maggie's chin trembled, but her eyes were steady. She was 7, and she was braver than men twice her age. And Caleb loved her so much in that moment, it physically hurt. "Is Eliza coming with me?" "No, baby. Eliza and I have to go to town." Maggie looked at Eliza, her lip pushed out. "You'll come back, right?" Eliza got out of her chair, knelt beside Caleb so she was eye level with Maggie. She took the girl's face in both hands. "Gentle, the way you hold something precious." "I will come back," Eliza said. "I promise you that, Margaret Thornton. I will come back to this house, and I will read to you tonight, and Captain is going to be right here waiting for us. Do you believe me?" Maggie searched Eliza's face with those brown eyes that missed nothing. "Yes," she said, "because you don't lie. Papa don't lie, and you don't lie. That's the rule in this house." "That's the rule," Eliza said, and her voice only broke a little. Caleb sent Maggie up the road to Nettie's on foot, watched until she was out of sight. Then he went inside and loaded the rifle and the shotgun and the pistol he kept in the drawer beside the bed. Eliza watched him. "You told Braddock you'd do this legal." "I told Braddock I understood him. I didn't promise anything." "Caleb." He stopped, looked at her. "If you shoot him," Eliza said, "you'll hang, and Maggie will have nobody. I won't let that happen. Not for me, not for anyone." She stepped toward him. "We do this my way. The statement, the testimony, the law. If the law fails, then—" She stopped. "Then we'll talk about the other thing. But we try the law first." Caleb held her gaze for a long time. Then he set the shotgun down, kept the rifle. "I ain't leaving the rifle," he said. "I didn't ask you to." They rode into town together, side by side. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said on the porch, and in the kitchen, and in every quiet moment they'd shared over the past 5 weeks. They knew what they were riding toward. They knew what it might cost. The town was already buzzing. 5 strangers on expensive horses had a way of getting attention in a place like Ridgeway. People stood on porches and in doorways, watching. The bartender was outside the saloon with his arms crossed. Martha Greer was in the window of the general store,
And for once, she wasn't talking. She was staring. Braddock was on the boardwalk in front of his office. His badge was polished. His gun was on his hip. His face looked like it had been carved from the same rock as the mountains. "He came early," Braddock said. Caleb dismounted, helped Eliza down. She brushed off her dress, straightened her spine. "Where is he?" she asked. "Hotel. Took 2 rooms." Braddock looked at Eliza. "The wire went to Cheyenne. Prosecutor's office confirmed they received your offer to testify. They're sending a representative. But he won't be here until Monday at the earliest." Monday. Eliza's jaw tightened. Randall planned it this way. Arrive early. Get what he wants before anyone with real authority shows up.
"Smart man," Braddock said. "Smart monster," Eliza corrected. "There's a difference." The door of the hotel opened. Randall Prescott walked out. He was handsome. That was the first thing anyone would notice, and the thing that made him most dangerous. Tall, clean-jawed, dark hair combed back with oil. A face that belonged on a campaign poster or a society page. He wore a suit that probably cost what Caleb made in 6 months, and he walked with the easy confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. He saw Eliza, and he smiled. It was the worst smile Caleb had ever seen. Warm, concerned, loving, perfect. The smile of a devoted husband finding his troubled wife after weeks of worry. If you didn't know, if you hadn't seen the bruises, hadn't heard the story, hadn't held this woman while she screamed in her sleep, you would have believed that smile. You would have believed everything about this man. "Eliza." Randall's voice carried across the street. "Thank God." His eyes filled with what looked exactly like tears. "I've been so worried. When you left, when you disappeared, I didn't know if you were alive or dead. I haven't slept. I've barely eaten." He took a step toward her. "Darling, please, let me take you home. We'll get you the help you need." He was good. He was very, very good. Caleb felt it, the pull of that performance, the way it tugged at something instinctive, something that wanted to believe that a man who looked like that and sounded like that couldn't possibly be what Eliza said he was. Then he looked at Eliza's hands. They were shaking. And he looked at her face. And what he saw there wasn't fear. It was rage. "Don't," Eliza said. Her voice cut through the street. "Don't you dare stand there and perform for these people." Randall's smile flickered, just a fraction, a hairline crack in the mask. "Eliza, you're not well. You know that. Dr. Marsh diagnosed—" "Dr. Marsh has never examined me," Eliza said. "Doctor." Marsh signed a paper your money put in front of him, the same way Judge Harker signed your court order, the same way every official in St. Louis signs whatever you tell them to sign because you own them. She took a step forward. "I am not sick, Randall. I was never sick. I was beaten. By you. In our home. For 2 years. People were gathering now, coming out of shops and houses, lining the boardwalks, watching. Randall's composure held, but his eyes changed. The warmth drained out of them like water through a crack, and what was underneath was flat and hard and cold. "My wife has been through a terrible ordeal," he said. "Not to Eliza anymore. To the crowd. To the town. She was attacked on the road by bandits. She's confused. Traumatized. The doctor in St. Louis warned me this might happen, that she might fabricate stories, assign blame to the people closest to her. It's a symptom of her condition." He shook his head with practiced sorrow. "All I want is to bring her home and get her the treatment she needs." Caleb watched the crowd.
Some faces were hard, skeptical, people who'd heard Eliza's story in the church. But others looked uncertain, looking at this well-dressed, well-spoken, tearful husband and wondering. Martha Greer's voice came from the boardwalk. "She says you beat her." Randall turned to Martha, his face crumpled with convincing pain. "Ma'am, I have never raised a hand to my wife. I love her more than my own life. The suggestion that I would—" He pressed his hand to his chest. "I can't even say the words. It destroys me." Silence. Martha looked at Eliza, looked at Randall. Caleb could see it, the doubt forming. The seed that had been planted weeks ago taking root. Then Doc Patterson's voice cut through from the other side of the street. "I treated her injuries," Doc said. He walked forward, slow, his gravel voice carried. 3 broken ribs, dislocated shoulder, strangulation marks on her throat, defensive cuts on both arms, and malnutrition consistent with deliberate starvation over a period of weeks. He stopped in front of Randall and looked up at him. "Bandits don't starve their victims, Mr. Prescott. Husbands do." Randall's mask cracked wider. His lip twitched. "And who are you, sir?" "I'm the doctor who put that woman back together after you broke her apart." Doc didn't blink. "And I'll testify to it in any court in this territory or any other." Dutton, the lawyer, stepped forward. "Doctor, I'd advise you to be very careful with your accusations. Mr. Prescott has a court order." "I've seen your court order," Braddock said, stepping off the boardwalk. He positioned himself between Randall and Eliza. Naturally, without making it obvious. "I've also seen a federal telegram stating that your client is under investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and suspected murder." The street went dead quiet. Randall's head turned toward Braddock, slowly. The concerned husband was gone. What looked out of those eyes now was something stripped clean, something that had been there all along, underneath the suit and the smile and the tears. "Murder," Braddock said. "A woman named Ruth Adler, domestic servant in your household, found dead at the bottom of a staircase 8 months ago. Federal prosecutor in Missouri has questions about that. A lot of questions." "That is a baseless, politically motivated investigation," Dutton said quickly. "Mr. Prescott has not been charged." "Not yet," Braddock said. "But a federal representative is on his way to Ridgeway right now. Should be here Monday. I reckon he'll have some interesting things to discuss with your client." Randall stood very still. His jaw worked. His hands, those clean, manicured, well-kept hands, curled into fists at his sides. And for 1 second, just one, the real Randall Prescott looked out at the world from behind the mask, and everyone on that street saw him. Caleb saw Martha Greer's hand go to her mouth. He saw old Pete Dawson take a step back. He saw the young man with the bowler hat look at Randall, and then look away, fast, like a man who just realized he was standing next to a rattlesnake. Eliza didn't look away. She looked straight at Randall, and Randall looked at her. And what passed between them was 2 years of closed doors and drawn curtains and silence and pain. And all of it was right there on the surface now. Right there in the open, where the whole town could see it. "You can't hide here," Randall said. His voice was different now, low, controlled. The pleasant conversational tone he used behind closed doors. "I will always find you, Eliza. I will spend every dollar I have. I will—" "You'll what?" Eliza said. She stepped past Braddock, past Caleb, until she was 6 feet from the man who had beaten her and starved her and left her for dead. "You'll hit me again? Break my ribs again?" choke me until I pass out, and wake me up and do it again?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You want to know why I'm not afraid of you anymore, Randall?" She took one more step. "Because I crawled. For 2 days, through the dirt, with 3 broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder, and I survived. You did your worst, and I survived it. And I crawled to a place where a 7-year-old girl handed me a stuffed rabbit and told me I was going to be okay." She paused. "You have money, you have lawyers, you have judges, but you don't have what I have. I have people who stood up for me when they didn't have to, and that's something you can't buy, and it's something you can't beat out of me, and it's something you will never, ever understand." Randall's face had gone white, not with shame, with fury. The kind of fury that lives in a man who has controlled everything his entire life, and is watching that control slip through his fingers in front of witnesses. He took a step toward her. 3 things happened at once. Caleb moved, not fast, deliberate. He stepped between Eliza and Randall and stood there. And he didn't raise the rifle, didn't clench his fists, just stood there like a wall that had been built for exactly this moment. Braddock's hand went to his gun. Easy, professional, his thumb on the hammer, and Frank Greer walked off the boardwalk and stood beside Caleb. Didn't say a word, just stood there. Big, solid, arms at his sides. Then Pete Dawson. Then the bartender. Then Reverend Oakes, who had never stood in front of anything more threatening than a poorly attended sermon in his entire life, walked into the street and stood with them. Randall looked at the men in front of him, looked at the crowd on the boardwalks, looked at his lawyer, who was already backing toward the horses, looked at his hired men, who were doing the same math Randall was doing and coming up with the same answer. "This isn't over," Randall said. Caleb looked at him. "It's been over since she crawled out of that creek bed. You just don't know it yet." Randall's mouth opened, closed. His eyes went to Eliza one more time, and what lived in those eyes was hatred so pure and so deep that it had no bottom. Then Dutton took his arm. "Mr. Prescott, we should go. We'll handle this through proper legal channels." Randall shook him off, but he stepped back, because he was, in the end, what Eliza had always known he was. A man who only hit people who couldn't hit back. A man who only fought battles he'd already won. And this battle, with a sheriff and a doctor and a town standing in his way, was not one he'd won. He turned, walked to his horse, mounted up. His hired men followed, but at the fence line he stopped, turned in the saddle. "Monday," he said, "when your marshal arrives, I'll be here, with my attorneys, with my court order, with every legal right the law affords a husband, and we'll see who's still standing." He rode east. The street stayed frozen for a long time after the hoofbeats faded. Then Eliza's knees gave out. Caleb caught her. His arms went around her, and he held her upright, and she gripped his shirt with both fists and pressed her forehead against his chest, and she shook. Not crying. Something deeper than crying. Something that had been locked inside her body for 2 years and was finally breaking loose. "I've got you," Caleb said. "Right here. I've got you." She pulled back, looked at his face. Her eyes were wild and wet and fierce. "He's coming back Monday." "I know. The marshal might not make it in time. I know that too." Eliza's hands were still tangled in his shirt. "What if the law doesn't work? What if his money wins? What if his court order—" "Then we fight," Caleb said. "Every way there is to fight." "But Eliza—" He put his hand on the side of her face. Careful. Tender. It was the first time he'd touched her face. His rough, calloused palm against her cheek.
I watched you stand in that street and look that man in the eye and tell him the truth in front of this whole town. And I watched him flinch. He flinched, Eliza. Not you. Him. Her breath caught. That man has been making you small for 2 years, Caleb said. And today, you stood 10 feet tall. And he couldn't handle it. That's all you need to know about who's going to win this. Eliza closed her eyes, leaned her cheek into his hand, just for a moment, just long enough. Then she straightened, wiped her face, stepped back. We need to prepare, she said. Her voice was rough but steady. I need to finish writing my statement. Every date, every incident, every name. And I need to write a letter to the federal prosecutor directly, not through the marshal, directly. If Randall thinks he's going to come back Monday with lawyers and make this go away, he's going to find out that I've been building a case while he's been building a tantrum. Caleb stared at her, and something shifted in his chest. Not the crack from before. This was something else, something that filled the crack instead of widening it. You're something, Eliza Calloway, he said. I'm a school teacher from St. Louis, she said, who's very tired of being underestimated. Nettie appeared at Caleb's elbow. She'd been watching from the boarding house porch the whole time. Her eyes were red. Her jaw was iron. I'm keeping Maggie tonight, Nettie said. You two have work to do. And Caleb, she poked him in the chest, you tell that woman how you feel about her before this is over, or I'll do it for you. Caleb's ears went red. Nettie, don't Nettie me. I've got eyes. The whole town's got eyes. The only 2 people who can't see it are the 2 people standing in it. She turned and walked away. Supper's at 6. Don't be late. Caleb stood on the boardwalk and watched her go. Then he looked at Eliza, who was looking at the ground, and whose neck was flushed the same color as his ears. Neither of them spoke. Braddock cleared his throat from the doorway of his office. If you two are done not saying what you're both thinking, I could use some help drafting legal documents. Caleb put his hat on, pulled it low. Let's go, he said. They worked until midnight. Eliza wrote her statement at Braddock's desk, filling page after page in a hand that started shaking and grew steadier with every line. She wrote dates, names, places. The name of the hotel where Randall took her after the train station. The name of the doctor who signed the papers. The name of her sister. The address of the house. The exact words Randall said the first time he hit her. The exact words he said every time after. Caleb sat in the corner and listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look away when the details got bad. He sat and he listened, and he bore witness. Because that was what she needed more than comfort or protection or promises. She needed someone to hear it. All of it. And not leave. At midnight, Eliza set the pen down. 14 pages. Her hand was cramped. Her eyes were dry. She looked at Caleb, and what passed between them in that look was worth more than every word she'd written. Thank you, she said, for staying. I ain't going anywhere. I know. She almost smiled. That's the miracle. They walked back to the ranch in the dark, side by side, their shoulders almost touching. Halfway home, Eliza stopped walking. Caleb stopped beside her. What is it? Eliza looked at him in the dark. Caleb, if Monday goes wrong, if the law fails, if Randall, it won't, but if it does. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers laced through his, firm, deliberate.
I need you to know something. Whatever happens, these 5 weeks in your house, with your daughter, in that schoolroom, on that porch. She squeezed his hand. It's the first time in my life I've known what it feels like to be safe. And that's because of you. Not because of the rifle by the door. Because of who you are. Because you knock on your own bedroom door, and you sleep in a barn in summer, and you let a broken woman put herself back together without ever once trying to decide what shape she should be. Caleb's hand tightened around hers. You ain't broken, he said. His voice was rough. You never were. You were just in the wrong hands. Eliza stepped closer, close enough for Caleb to see her eyes in the dark, close enough for him to feel her breath. And now? She whispered. Caleb lifted his free hand, touched her face. That same careful touch from the street, but different now. Slower, more deliberate. A man choosing to cross a line he'd sworn he wouldn't cross until she was ready. Now you're in the right ones, he said. She kissed him. Not the way kisses happen in stories. Not sudden, not desperate. Slow. She rose up on her toes, and she put her hand on the back of his neck, and she kissed him. And it was a question and an answer and a beginning, all wrapped in one. And when Caleb kissed her back, his hands trembling against her face, it was with the gentleness of a man who understood that this woman had survived the worst kind of touch and was choosing, freely, finally, on her own terms, to trust again. When they pulled apart, Eliza's forehead rested against his chin. Monday, she said. Monday, he agreed. Whatever comes. Whatever comes. They stood in the dark, holding each other, two people who had both lost everything, and found something neither of them had been looking for. And Monday was coming, and Randall Prescott was coming with it. And the law was a coin toss, and the marshal was a maybe, and the future was nothing but a guess. But right now, right here, in the dark, on this road, with this man's arms around her and his heartbeat under her ear and his rough hands gentle on her back. Right now was enough. Monday came with a knock on the door before sunrise. Caleb was already awake. He'd been awake most of the night, sitting in the kitchen with the rifle across his lap and the lamp turned low, listening to Eliza breathe in the next room, and running through every way this day could go. Most of the ways ended badly. He opened the door. Braddock stood on the porch. His face told the story before his mouth did. Marshall's not coming, Braddock said. Caleb's hand tightened on the door frame. Got a wire an hour ago. He's delayed. Landslide took out a section of track west of Laramie. Could be 2 more days. Maybe 3. Caleb said nothing for a long time. Then he stepped back and let Braddock in. Eliza appeared in the bedroom doorway. She'd heard. She was already dressed. Her hair was pulled back. Her jaw was set. She looked at Braddock and didn't ask questions she already knew the answers to. What do we have? She asked. Braddock sat at the table. We have your statement, 14 pages, sworn and signed. We have Doc Patterson's medical report. We have the telegram from the federal prosecutor confirming an active investigation. We have a town full of witnesses who heard your testimony at the church. He paused. And we have Prescott's court order, which is legal, valid, and signed by a federal judge. Eliza sat down across from him. So it comes down to which piece of paper weighs more. It comes down to me, Braddock said. He looked at her straight. I'm the law in this town. When Prescott walks in here today with that court order, he's going to demand I enforce it. And I have to make a decision. The kitchen went quiet. Caleb leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. What decision are you leaning toward, Tom? Caleb asked. Braddock tugged his mustache. I've been sheriff 11 years.
I've enforced the law every single day of those 11 years, even when it was hard. Even when it was ugly. Because the day a lawman starts picking which laws to follow and which to ignore is the day the law stops meaning anything. Eliza's face went still. But, Braddock said. He leaned forward. I also swore an oath to protect the people of this town. And you're one of my people now, Eliza. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell Randall Prescott that I've received communication from a federal prosecutor indicating that he is the subject of an active criminal investigation. I'm going to tell him that until that investigation is resolved, I am exercising my authority as local law enforcement to delay the execution of any civil court order that might compromise a federal case. He paused. It's a stretch. It might not hold up, but it'll buy us time. How much time? Caleb asked. Enough, Braddock said. I hope. He left. Caleb and Eliza sat at the table across from each other. The coffee went cold between them. If it doesn't hold, Eliza said. It'll hold, Caleb. She reached across the table and gripped his wrist. If it doesn't hold, if Braddock can't stop him, if Randall walks out of that sheriff's office with the legal right to take me, promise me something. Don't. Promise me you won't do something that puts a noose around your neck. Maggie needs her father. Do you hear me? Whatever happens to me, Maggie needs her father. Caleb pulled his wrist free, not rough, gentle. He took her hand and held it. Nothing is happening to you, he said. Not today, not ever again. You can't promise that. Watch me. They rode into town at 9. The main street was already full. Word had spread the way it always did in small towns, fast, crooked, and completely unstoppable. People stood on porches and leaned in doorways and gathered in clusters, talking low. Nettie was stationed outside the boarding house, with Maggie beside her, the girl clutching Captain the Rabbit in one hand and Nettie's skirt in the other. Eliza stopped in front of them, knelt down. I told you I'd come back, she said to Maggie. You came back, Maggie said. But you're scared. I can tell because your hands are doing the thing. Eliza looked at her hands. They were trembling. She closed them into fists. Yes, she said. I'm scared. But I'm here. And that's what matters. Maggie leaned forward and whispered in Eliza's ear. Captain says the bad man is stupid and ugly, and his horse probably doesn't even like him. Eliza laughed. It burst out of her, short and raw and real, and it surprised her so much that she pressed her hand over her mouth. But it was there, laughter, on this morning, in the middle of this fear, because a 7-year-old girl with a one-eared rabbit had decided that the monster could be made ridiculous. Nettie put her hand on Eliza's shoulder. The whole town's watching, she said. Half of them are praying. The other half are armed. We've got you, girl. Randall Prescott arrived at 10. Same 5 riders, same black horse, same gray suit. But today there was something different about him. A tightness around his mouth, a sharpness in his movements. He dismounted with the precision of a man who is holding himself together through pure will. Dutton carried a leather case. They walked into the sheriff's office. Caleb and Eliza followed. Braddock was behind his desk. Doc Patterson stood in the corner, arms folded. Reverend Oakes sat by the window, looking like a man who wished he'd chosen a different profession, but wasn't about to leave. Sheriff, Dutton began, placing the leather case on the desk. We're here to execute a lawful court order from the 8th Circuit. I'm aware of your court order, Braddock said. Sit down, Mr. Dutton. Dutton blinked, sat. Randall remained standing. His eyes found Eliza, held her. The warmth from Friday was gone. What lived in those eyes now was pure transaction. A man calculating costs and returns.
"I've been patient," Randall said. "I've been civil. I followed every legal channel available to me. I have a court order signed by a federal judge granting me custody of my wife. I expect it to be honored." Braddock leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Prescott, I've received communication from the federal prosecutor's office in Missouri indicating that you are the subject of an active criminal investigation. Fraud, embezzlement, and a suspicious death in your household." He let that sit. "Until that investigation is resolved, I'm not comfortable executing a civil order that could remove a potential witness from federal jurisdiction." Dutton was on his feet. "Sheriff, that is not within your authority. A civil court order—" "Sit down, Mr. Dutton. This is outrageous. We'll take this to a territorial judge. We'll have you removed from your position."
You'll do what you need to do," Braddock said, "and I'll do what I need to do. But today, in this office, in my town, that woman is not leaving with your client."
Randall's composure cracked. Not a little. A lot. His face twisted, and for half a second the man behind the mask was visible. Red-faced, furious, ugly with the kind of rage that only comes from a person who has never been denied anything meaningful in his entire life. "She is my wife," Randall said. His voice dropped, low, controlled. The bedroom voice. The behind closed doors voice. Eliza's spine went rigid. "She is my legal property under—" "She is not property." The voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. A man stood in the frame. 50s, lean, weathered face. A silver star pinned to his coat. Not a sheriff's star. A U.S. Marshal's star. He wore trail dust on his boots, and his horse was still breathing hard outside the window. "Deputy U.S. Marshal James Coulter," the man said, "out of Cheyenne." He looked at Braddock. "I understand you've been expecting me, Sheriff. Apologize for the delay." He looked at Randall. "And I understand you've been expecting me too, Mr. Prescott. Though perhaps not quite this soon." Randall's face went the color of ash. "The marshal didn't come in Monday," Braddock had said. Landslide. 2 more days. Maybe 3. But here he was, Monday morning, standing in the doorway. Caleb looked at Braddock. Braddock's expression didn't change, but his mustache twitched, just barely. The old fox had lied. He'd known the marshal was coming. He'd told Caleb and Eliza the marshal was delayed, so that if Prescott had anyone watching, anyone listening, anyone feeding information back, Prescott would believe he had time, would believe he had leverage, would walk into this office expecting to face a small-town sheriff with a stretched legal argument and nothing else. Instead, he was facing the United States government. Coulter walked into the room, pulled a folded document from his coat. "Randall Prescott," he said, "I'm carrying a federal warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and suspicion of murder in the death of Ruth Adler." He unfolded the paper. "This warrant supersedes any civil court order currently in your possession." He looked at Dutton. "I assume you're his attorney? You'll want to review this." Dutton took the warrant. "Read it." His face went through several colors, none of them healthy. Randall didn't move. He stood in the center of the room, and something happened to him that Caleb had never seen happen to a man in real time. He diminished. Not physically. Something else. The authority drained out of him. The confidence. The control. All the things that had made him powerful and dangerous and terrifying peeled away. And what was left was a man in an expensive suit who was about to lose everything he'd built his life on. He looked at Eliza, and Eliza looked back. "You said this wasn't over," she said. Her voice was quiet, steady,
almost kind in the way that real strength sometimes sounds like kindness. "You were right. It isn't over. It's just beginning. And this time, I'm not the one on the ground." Randall's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Coulter stepped forward. "Mr. Prescott, you can come with me quietly, or you can make this difficult. But either way, you're coming with me." Randall looked at Dutton. Dutton looked at the floor. "My men," Randall said. His voice was hollow. "Your men can ride home," Coulter said, "or they can join you. Their choice." Randall straightened his coat, adjusted his cravat. Even now, even in this moment, the performance held. He smoothed his hair, lifted his chin, looked around the room as if he were leaving a party that had simply run too late. Then he walked toward the door, stopped beside Eliza, leaned close. Caleb moved. Coulter's hand went to his gun. Randall whispered something, too low for anyone else to hear. Only Eliza. She didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't blink. She leaned in and whispered back. 2 words. Caleb couldn't hear them. Nobody could. But he saw Randall's face when they landed, and whatever Eliza said hit harder than any fist ever had. Randall walked out of the sheriff's office. Coulter followed. Dutton followed. The hired men, who had been waiting outside with the horses, took one look at the federal marshal and the badge and the warrant, and got on their horses without a word. Caleb watched from the boardwalk as Randall Prescott was led to the marshal's horse, and his hands were bound, and he was mounted on his own black horse with a rope connecting him to Coulter's saddle. He didn't look back. Not once. The street was silent as they rode out. 5 horses going east, getting smaller, getting quieter. Then they were gone. Eliza stood on the boardwalk. Her hands were at her sides. Her face was still. She breathed in, breathed out. "It's done," Braddock said behind her. Eliza shook her head. "It's not done. The trial, the testimony, the lawyers. It'll take months, maybe longer. But he's gone." Eliza closed her eyes. "Yes," she said. "He's gone." Maggie broke free from Nettie and came running down the boardwalk at full speed. She slammed into Eliza's legs so hard she nearly knocked her over. Eliza stumbled, caught herself, dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around the girl and held on. "Did the bad man go away?" Maggie asked. "Yes, baby. The bad man went away." "Is he coming back?" "No." Eliza pulled back and looked at Maggie's face. "He's not coming back." "Good." Maggie reached into her pocket and pulled out Captain the rabbit. "Captain says he's hungry. Can we go home now?" Eliza laughed again. "Second time. Easier this time. Warmer." "Yes," she said. "We can go home." She stood up, turned to Caleb. He was standing 3 feet away, hat in his hands, looking at her with an expression she'd never seen on any man's face before. Not desire, not relief, not triumph. Wonder. Like he was seeing something he hadn't believed could exist, and it was standing right in front of him. "Take me home, Caleb," Eliza said. He put his hat on, offered his hand. She took it. They walked to the horses. Caleb lifted Maggie up first, then helped Eliza mount, then swung up himself. 3 people on 2 horses, heading west, and behind them, the town of Ridgeway watched them go and didn't say a word, because some moments are too complete for words. Nettie blew her nose into a handkerchief, loudly. Doc Patterson took off his spectacles and cleaned them for the 3rd time. Braddock went back into his office and closed the door and sat at his desk and looked at the chair where Randall Prescott had been standing 5 minutes ago. Then he opened his desk drawer and took out a bottle of whiskey he kept for occasions and poured himself a glass. It was 10:30 in the morning. He figured he'd earned it. That night, Caleb sat on the porch. Eliza came out and sat in the chair he'd built for her. Inside, Maggie was asleep, with Captain and Sergeant, the one-eyed cat, curled up together at the foot of the bed. The quiet settled around them. Not the tense quiet of the past weeks. A different kind. The kind that exists when the thing you've been bracing for has finally happened, and you're still standing. "What did he say to you?" Caleb asked. "In the sheriff's office, when he whispered." Eliza was quiet for a moment. "He said I'd always belonged to him, that no piece of paper could change that." Caleb's jaw tightened. "And what did you say back?" Eliza looked at him. "I said goodbye." She reached over and took his hand, laced her fingers through his, held on. "Caleb, I need to ask you something." "Ask." "When this started, when you found me in the creek, you said you helped me because your daughter saw me and said I was broken. Because in your house, when something's broken, you fix it." "I remember." Eliza turned toward him. "I'm not broken anymore." She said it clearly, simply, as a fact. "I'm not fixed either. I've got cracks that are going to take years to fill. Things that'll wake me up at night for a long time. I'll flinch at loud noises and jump at shadows, and there'll be days when I can't be touched, and days when I need to be alone." She held his gaze. "But I'm not broken. And I need to know, now that I'm not something that needs fixing, do you still want me here?" Caleb pulled her hand closer. He held it against his chest, right over his heart. And he spoke carefully, because the words mattered more than any words he'd ever said. "I didn't fall in love with you because you were broken, Eliza. I fell in love with you because of what you did when you were broken. You crawled. You stood up. You taught my daughter to read. You taught this whole town to stand for something." He tightened his grip on her hand. "I don't want you here because you need me. I want you here because every morning I wake up and walk into that kitchen and see your coffee cup next to mine. And it feels like the house finally makes sense. It feels like the house has been waiting for you the same way I have, without knowing it, for 3 years." Eliza's eyes filled. Caleb kept going. "And I know you've been through something that should have killed your faith in men forever. And I know I'm just a rancher with a busted porch and a barn that leaks and a daughter who talks more than any 3 adults combined. I ain't rich. I ain't polished. I can't give you—" "Stop," Eliza said. She put her free hand over his mouth. "Just stop." He stopped. She pulled her hand away, replaced it with her lips, kissed him, soft, certain. When she pulled back, she said, "You gave me a chair." "What?" "You built me a chair, Caleb. You didn't ask me to stay. You didn't tell me to stay. You built a chair and put it on the porch next to yours, and you didn't say a single word about it." She was crying now, freely, openly, the way a person cries when they're not afraid of what will happen if someone sees. "That's how I knew. That's how I knew you were different. Because Randall gave me flowers, and poetry, and promises. You gave me a chair, and a place at your table, and a door I could lock from the inside, and the freedom to leave whenever I wanted to." She wiped her eyes. "That's love, Caleb. The real kind. The kind I didn't think existed until a 7-year-old girl handed me a stuffed rabbit in a creek bed in Wyoming." Caleb pressed his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said. It was the first time he'd asked. "I'm staying," she said. It was the last time she'd need to answer.
They were married in August. Reverend Oakes performed the ceremony in the schoolhouse because Eliza said that was where she'd become herself again, and that was where she wanted to start the next part of her life. Maggie was the flower girl. She carried Captain the rabbit instead of flowers, and nobody corrected her. Nettie made the cake, 3 layers. Doc Patterson said it was the best thing she'd ever baked, and Nettie said that was the first sensible thing he'd said in 30 years. Braddock stood as witness. He wore a clean shirt for the occasion, which was so unusual that several people commented on it. He told them all to mind their own business. The whole town came, every last person. Even Martha Greer, who sat in the back row and cried harder than anyone, and never told a soul why. When Reverend Oakes asked Caleb if he took this woman to be his wife, Caleb said, "I do," and his voice cracked, and he didn't care. When the Reverend asked Eliza, she looked at Caleb, and she looked at Maggie, and she said, "I do. I choose this, freely. For the first time in my life, I am choosing." Caleb kissed her. Maggie cheered. Sergeant, the one-eyed cat, who had somehow gotten into the schoolhouse, knocked over a vase of wildflowers. Nobody minded. That evening, after the food and the music and the toasts, after the town had drifted home and the lamps had dimmed, Eliza sat on the porch in her chair. Caleb sat in his. Maggie was asleep inside, exhausted, Captain tucked under her chin. Eliza leaned her head against Caleb's shoulder. "Your daughter said something to me once," Eliza said. "The first week I was here. She said we needed each other, that we just didn't know it yet." Caleb nodded. "She's smarter than both of us. She gets it from Rebecca." Caleb went quiet. "Tell me about her," Eliza said. "Not the sad parts, the good parts." Caleb stared out into the dark for a long time. Then he started talking. About Rebecca's laugh, which was louder than his and twice as frequent. About the way she sang off-key and didn't care. About the biscuits. About the morning Maggie was born and Rebecca looked at him and said, "Well, Caleb, I reckon we're stuck with her now." About the last night, when the fever was bad, and Rebecca grabbed his hand and said, "Don't you dare let that girl grow up thinking the world is mean. You hear me? Don't you dare." "I hear you," Caleb said. Same words he'd said that night 3 years ago. "I hear you, Rebecca." Eliza lifted her head and kissed his jaw. She would have loved this, she said. Rebecca, this night, this mess, all of it. She would have loved you, Caleb said. In November, a letter arrived from Missouri. The trial was set for March. Eliza would need to travel to St. Louis to testify. She read the letter at the kitchen table. Caleb watched her face. "I'll go," Eliza said. "I'll testify. I'll look him in the eye in that courtroom, and I'll say every word that needs saying." "I'm going with you," Caleb said. "I know you are." Maggie climbed into Eliza's lap. She'd taken to doing that lately, climbing into Eliza's lap the way she used to climb into Rebecca's, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Are you going on a trip, Mama?" The kitchen went still. Maggie had never called her that before. The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into deep water, and the ripples went out in every direction. Eliza's arms tightened around the girl. She looked at Caleb. He looked back. His eyes were bright. "Yes, baby," Eliza said. Her voice was steady and unsteady at the same time. "I'm going on a trip, but I'm coming back. I will always come back. Promise?" "Promise." Maggie nodded, satisfied. Then she wriggled down and went to find Sergeant, because she was 7, and the world's biggest moments and its smallest ones occupied the same amount of space in her heart. Caleb reached across the table and took Eliza's hand. She held on.
Outside, Wyoming stretched in every direction, open and wide, and indifferent to the small, fierce lives being lived inside this cabin. The land didn't care about court orders or federal warrants or men with money or women who crawled through the dirt to save themselves. The land just was. It endured, same as the people on it. Eliza Calloway Thornton had been beaten and left to die. She had crawled through the mud with broken ribs. She had been found by a man and a girl and a one-eared rabbit. She had stood up in a church and told the truth. She had stood in a street and faced a monster. She had chosen love, not the kind that comes with flowers and poetry and lies, but the kind that comes with a chair on a porch and a locked door, and a man who knocks before entering his own bedroom. She had chosen, freely, completely, and that made all the difference.